Imagine you could peer inside the financial engine of a global defense giant. What kind of picture would emerge from the numbers? What surprises might you uncover?
It's always fascinating, isn't it? Especially with a company like Lockheed Martin.
Exactly. So today we're doing a deep dive into their second quarter 2025 financial results. Our mission really is to unpack the critical data, understand the hits and, well, the misses too.
And figure out what it actually means for a company that plays such a massive role in global security.
Right. We've pulled insights from, their official earnings call, the press release, the SEC filings, the works, to give you a really comprehensive picture.
Good stuff. So where do we start? The headlines.
Let's kick things off right there with the headline numbers. Sales in Q2 2025 were $18.2 billion. Now, that's a slight uptick from $18.1 billion in Q2 2024, just slightly up.
Okay, so top line holding steady, more or less.
More or less. But here's where it gets really interesting. Net earnings. They saw a significant drop, down to $342 million or 1.46 per share.
Wow. Okay, compared to what?
Compared to a pretty robust $1.6 billion or 6.85 cents per share in Q2 of 2024. So a huge difference.
That's a massive swing downwards. So the obvious question then is,
Yeah, how can Lockheed Martin take such a huge hit to its net earnings in one quarter, yet confidently reaffirm its full year 2025 guidance for both sales and free cash flow? How's that work?
well, that juxtaposition, as you said, that's really the key thing here. For a company to absorb that kind of financial blow in a single quarter but keep its projections, it often signals management sees these losses as, one-offs.
Like clearing the decks.
Exactly, clearing the decks, taking the hit now for specific program issues or resets, rather than thinking there's a fundamental problem with their core earning power or their future sales pipeline.
So it's almost like a vote of confidence in the underlying business despite these, well, pretty painful numbers.
Precisely. Confidence in future demand, future efficiency, even with these current headlines.
Okay, so let's unpack those numbers then. The program losses and the other charges that caused this earnings plunge. Lockheed Martin recognized, get this, $1.6 billion in pre-tax program losses.
$1.6 billion.
Oof. Plus another $169 million in other charges this quarter. You add that all up, and it hit their earnings per share by a massive $5.83.
$5.83 per share just from these charges and losses. That puts the $1.46 official final EPS into perspective. It really dominated the quarter.
It really did.
Yeah.
So diving into the key programs. First up, there's a classified aeronautics program. This one alone accounts for a huge chunk, $950 million pre-tax loss.
$950 million on one program. What went wrong there?
What the sources say was a mix of things: design, integration, test challenges, plus other performance issues that just blew up the schedule and the costs way more than they expected.
Sounds like a classic case of complexity catching up. These advanced programs are incredibly difficult.
For sure. They did a whole internal review, apparently, and made some significant changes to their processes and testing for this program going forward.
And if you look at the bigger picture, the cumulative losses on this specific classified program are now around $1.4 billion for the initial phase, plus another $355 million on additional phases.
That's staggering. It really makes you wonder, what does it actually take to get a super complex, top-secret project like this back on the rails?
Yeah, it's a huge question for the whole industry. It's often not just about throwing more money at it, right? It can mean rethinking the core tech, changing partners. It shows the immense risks in pushing the envelope in defense tech.
And it seems these kinds of challenges aren't just limited to the secret stuff. Yeah. We see similar issues, maybe on a different scale, playing out internationally, too.
Like the Canadian helicopter program.
Exactly. The Canadian Maritime Helicopter Program, CMHP, that one had a $570 million pre-tax loss recognized this quarter.
Okay, and what's the story there?
Well, they've been in ongoing talks with the Canadian government. It sounds like they reached what they're calling a mutually beneficial solution. Basically, Lockheed Martin agreed to provide enhanced capabilities, upgrade the existing fleet, and improve, helicopter usage and recovery for the support contract they have.
So essentially investing more into the program to satisfy the customer and resolve ongoing issues, which results in recognizing that loss now.
Seems like it. And there's another one, the Turkish Utility Helicopter Program, TUHP. That resulted in a $95 million pre-tax loss.
$95 million. Still significant.
Yeah. And discussions are apparently still ongoing with Turkish industry to restructure that whole program, maybe change the scope. It's complicated by U.S. sanctions and a partial work stoppage that started back in October 2024.
Ooh, sanctions add a whole other layer of complexity. And are there disputes?
Yep, the customer is apparently asserting claims for penalties and damages. So, yeah, pretty complex situation there, too.
Okay, so those are the big program losses. What about the other charges you mentioned, the $169 million?
Right, so besides those program hits, there were a couple of other significant items. First, a $66 million asset impairment charge.
Asset impairment, meaning they had to write down the value of something.
Exactly. It was mainly for writing off fixed assets tied to the U.S. Air Force's Next Generation Air Dominance Program, NGAD, because of the down select decision.
Ah, so they invested in assets, maybe tooling or facilities, for a bid or a phase that didn't move forward as they hoped, so they had to write off that investment. Makes sense.
And the other one is, well, kind of intriguing, a $103 million charge related to uncertain tax positions.
Tax issues. That usually means a disagreement with the IRS or another tax authority.
You got it. This one stems from a proposed adjustment by the IRS. They're apparently seeking about $4.6 billion with a B in additional federal income tax for the years 2018 to 2020.
$4.6 billion, that's huge. What's the disagreement about?
Lockheed Martin fundamentally disagrees. They say the IRS's approach creates a mismatch between when revenue is recognized and when expenses are deducted. They argue their own method, which, interestingly, the IRS had previously approved, is correct.
Previously approved, that definitely complicates things, so they're fighting it.
Oh, yeah. They're actively appealing it. But they had to recognize the $103 million charge this quarter related to the uncertainty.
Okay. So you have these massive program losses, the impairment, the tax charge. How's management responding? What are they saying they'll do about it?
Well, the CFO, Evan Scott, talked about this on the earnings call. He mentioned things like adding more rigor to their program management controls, bringing in subject matter experts, holding regular independent reviews.
Standard procedure, but sounds like they're doubling down on oversight.
Pretty much, especially where there's high technical complexity or tricky contract stuff, they seem to be taking it very seriously internally.
Which you'd expect after losses of this size. They need to show they're learning from it.
And the CEO, Jim Tacklet, kind of echoed that. He emphasized that, yeah, these charges are difficult, they impact the 2025 outlook, but they see it as a necessary step, to get better positioned for profitable growth down the road.
Taking the medicine now for long-term health. It's a common theme when companies face these kinds of setbacks.
Right. Okay, so that covers the big picture losses. Now let's drill down a bit into how each business segment actually performed. First up, aeronautics. That's the home of the F-35.
Yeah, the biggest segment usually.
So sales there were actually up 2% to $7.42 billion, and that was mostly driven by higher F-35 production volume.
Okay, so F-35 is still ramping up or holding strong on deliveries. That's positive.
It is, however, the operating profit for aeronautics, it swung into a loss of $98 million. That's down 113% from Q2 last year.
Whoa! So sales up, but profit massively down. That has to be because of...
That $950 million classified program loss we talked about, it sits in the aeronautics segment, so it just completely wiped out the profit there.
Right, that makes sense. Even with that huge hit on the classified side, the F-35 itself as a program sounds like it's still a major pillar for them.
Absolutely. They mentioned strong international demand continues. Singapore, the UK announcing more purchases. And they've delivered, what, almost 1,200 F-35s total now since the beginning.
Yeah, 11,199 delivered since inception, with a backlog of 311 delivered just through the end of June 2025, according to the release. It's still a massive, crucial program globally.
Okay, so aeronautics was a mixed bag because of that one huge loss. What about missiles and fire control, MFC?
Ah, MFC. Now, that was a clear bright spot this quarter, based on the numbers.
Yeah, how'd they do?
Sales were up a healthy 11% to $3.43 billion.
11% is pretty strong growth. What drove that?
Higher volume on a bunch of tactical and strike missile programs, things like JSM, LRSM, HIMARS, which we hear a lot about, and PRISM.
So strong demand for munitions and missile systems makes sense given the global environment.
Definitely. And importantly, operating profit for MFC was also up by 6%. So good top-line growth and decent profit growth, too. A solid performance there.
Okay, good news from MFC. Now, unfortunately, the next segment, Rotary and Mission Systems, or RMS, that story sounds more like aeronautics, maybe even worse.
Yeah, RMS had a rough quarter. Sales decreased 12% to $3.99 billion.
Sales down 12%, and the profit.
Profit took a huge hit. It decreased 135%, swinging to a $172 million operating loss.
Another operating loss. What caused that?
Well, primarily those big program losses we already discussed, the Canadian Maritime Helicopter Program, CMHP, and the Turkish Utility Helicopter Program, TUHP, those sit within RMS.
Oh, okay. So just like the classified program hit aeronautics, these two hit RMS really hard.
Exactly. Plus, they also had lower production volume on Seahawk helicopter programs and lower volume on some of their integrated warfare systems and sensors programs, IWSS. So it was kind of a perfect storm for RMS this quarter.
Gotcha. All right, one segment left. Space. How did the space division do?
Space was actually another positive story. Similar to MFC in direction, if not quite the same magnitude, sales increased 4% to $3.31 billion.
Okay, modest growth and profit.
Operating profit was up 5%, so profit growing slightly ahead of sales.
What was driving the growth in space?
Mostly higher volume in commercial civil space, particularly the Orion program, for NASA's Artemis missions, and also in strategic and missile defense, things like the Next Generation Interceptor and Fleet Ballistic Missile programs.
So big government space programs doing well.
Right. But that was partly offset by a decrease in national security space. That seems to be due to where the Next Gen OPR program is in its life cycle.
Next Gen OPR. That's the Next Generation Missile Warning Satellite System, right?
Exactly. Key program. It's likely moving from a high-cost development phase into maybe a more stable but lower revenue production or sustainment phase. That's pretty typical for these long-cycle programs.
Makes sense. And didn't they just buy something in the space area, too?
They did, yeah. They recently acquired Amentum's Rapid Solutions business for $360 million. The idea there is to boost their capabilities in space and airborne missions, showing they're still investing strategically in growth areas within space.
Okay. So we've looked inside Lockheed Martin, the big losses, the segment performance. But of course, they don't operate in a vacuum. Let's step back and look at the bigger picture, the external forces.
Absolutely crucial context. The global security environment, first off, is obviously a huge driver for a company like this.
Yeah, the sources definitely highlight that ongoing conflicts, Europe, the Middle East, the Pacific, have really heightened tensions and security needs globally. That drives interest in Lockheed Martin's products.
For sure. But it's worth remembering, as I always point out, this is a long-cycle business. Increased tension today doesn't necessarily mean huge sales tomorrow. It takes time for budgets to adjust and contracts to be awarded.
Right, and then there are the more mundane but still critical challenges like supply chain and the economy.
Still very much a factor. The reports mention persistent supply chain issues, shortages, supplier performance problems leading to delays, and higher costs because of inflation.
Well, they're doing anything about it.
Yeah, they say they're actively working on mitigation, supporting suppliers who are struggling, locking in long-term contracts where they can, looking for alternative sources. It's a constant battle for large manufacturers right now, not just in defense.
And then the big one for Lockheed Martin, the U.S. government budget.
Always critical. They are still the primary customer. 73% of sales in the first half of 2025 came from the U.S. government, with most of that, 63%, from the Department of Defense.
So their fortunes are obviously tied very closely to U.S. defense spending levels.
Absolutely. Funding depends on budget requests, what Congress appropriates, shifting priorities. We heard about the FY25 continuing resolution. The FY26 budget request is in the works. It's an ongoing cycle.
And there was an interesting policy change mentioned too, right? Something about R&D taxes.
Yes. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act, quite a name, signed on July 4th. It reinstates the ability for companies to fully deduct R&D expenses in the year they occur, starting in 2025.
And why is that a big deal?
Well, for the last couple of years, companies had to amortize those R&D costs over 5 years, which increased their taxable income up front. Reverting to full, immediate deduction is expected to significantly decrease Lockheed Martin's cash tax liability for the year.
So potentially freeing up more cash.
Potentially, yeah. It gives them more financial flexibility. It's a significant win for industries that invest heavily in R&D, like aerospace and defense.
Okay, so we've covered the numbers, the external forces, but there's another layer here. Something about how they operate internally, especially around people and information. It's about their post-employment conduct agreements, or PICAs.
Ah, yes, the non-competes and non-solicitation clauses. This is always a really interesting and sometimes controversial aspect of high-tech and defense industries.
What's the gist of Lockheed Martin's policy here?
Well, these agreements are basically designed to protect their secrets, their intellectual property, their goodwill. They restrict former employees, especially senior ones, from immediately jumping ship to a direct competitor.
Like who? Who counts as a competitor?
The documents list companies like Boeing, Northrop Grumman, Raytheon, the usual suspects. The restriction period varies. For elected officers, it's typically 2 years. For other non-officers, it's 1 year.
And what can't they do during that time?
They're generally prohibited from working for one of those restricted companies in a role that oversees or affects competitive products or services, or, crucially, where their confidential Lockheed Martin information could be used to the competitor's advantage. So it's pretty specific about protecting competitive intelligence and trade secrets.
Exactly. And there are consequences. If someone breaches the agreement, the company can demand repayment of severance, seek injunctions. There are clawback provisions, too, for misconduct.
Makes sense in an industry built on highly sensitive information. But how enforceable are these? Don't state laws vary?
They do, and the documents acknowledge that. There are specific carve-outs or adjustments mentioned for states like Colorado and D.C., which have their own laws about non-competes, especially concerning compensation thresholds.
Right, some states are much stricter about limiting non-competes, particularly for lower paid employees, or setting maximum time limits.
Yeah, like in D.C., the non-compete period for elected officers is apparently reduced to 1 year instead of 2, based on local law. It shows how complex it is to apply these policies nationwide.
So it really raises that question, doesn't it? How do these detailed legal frameworks, these non-competes, actually influence talent movement and the whole competitive landscape in such a specialized field like defense?
It's got to be a tightrope walk, right?
Totally. On one side, you absolutely need to protect billions in R&D, national security secrets. On the other, you don't want to completely stifle innovation or prevent talented people from progressing in their careers within the broader industry.
Fighting that balance, especially with all the different state laws. It must be a constant challenge for HR and legal departments.
No doubt. It shapes who can move where and when, and potentially influences how companies compete for talent.
Okay, so let's try to wrap this all up. What does this really mean for you, listening in, trying to stay informed about the defense industry? Lockheed Martin's Q2 2025. Well, it was definitely a complex picture.
Yeah, complex is a good word, clearly marked by those very significant program losses. The classified Arrow 1, the Canadian and Turkish helicopters, those really hurt the bottom line this quarter.
But at the same time, you saw pretty robust performance in other areas, especially missiles and fire control, and space also showed growth. So it wasn't all bad news.
Right. And the company seems to be actively tackling the problems, with internal reviews, doubling down on oversight, making strategic adjustments, all while dealing with everything else.
Like the tricky global security situation, those ongoing supply chain headaches, and the ever-shifting government budget priorities. It's really a snapshot of a huge company grappling with big wins and big setbacks in a very high-stakes game.
Absolutely. It highlights the volatility and the long-term nature of this business. So maybe the final thought to leave folks with.
Go for it.
As we look at the sheer scale of these defense programs, the billions of dollars, the cutting-edge tech, the web of finance and geopolitics, what are the really long-term implications when we see these kinds of deep financial dives, not just for Lockheed Martin, but for, national defense strategies, for the global economy, especially as security seems to rely more and more on this kind of advanced and sometimes fragile technology?